As we get closer to the start of the new year, I've been thinking a lot about all the different video games that helped me get to where I am now. So many characters have come and gone throughout my years of gaming, and it's because of some really, truly badass and cool characters in those games why I'm still in love with the video games today. And thanks to a Stars Patreon member, Javi Rod, I want to share with you guys the characters that really hit home for me. You know, my personal favorite video game characters of all time. And let me tell you, they're not just the basic favorites that most people might have, like a Mario or a Master Chief. No, these are characters that for one reason or another personally made a connection with me to the point where I'll never forget them. No matter how weird and completely out of left field some of these characters might be. One side note though, to keep things interesting and to stop me from filling this list with a bunch of Resident Evil characters, I'm only choosing one character per franchise, no exceptions. Before we jump into today's list though, if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Remember, I usually do ranking videos 3 times a week. Plus, now that we are about to hit December, you'll start seeing a bunch of top 10 videos of 2023. Stuff like best games, best horror games, best villains, and so on. As a matter of fact, at the end of this video, don't forget to leave a comment. Tell me what type of list video would you like to see on the games released this year. Anyway, my name is Ruben with Nerdspace Games, and this is my list for top 10 best video game characters of all time. Let's get it. Number 10, Marcus Fenix, Gears of War.
Food in prison smelled bad.
Gears of War is a series that I haven't really talked much about on my channel, mainly because it's been quiet for a while now. Sure, Gears of War 5 was fantastic, but since then, we've really only seen a movie get announced and Batista joining the game as a new skin for Marcus. Outside of that, nothing else recently. Anyway, Marcus Fenix is the heart of Gears of War. I can't really imagine a game without him. I mean, I can, sort of, with Judgment, but ironically, that turned out to be my least favorite of the series, so what does that tell you? Something about having Fenix on screen just prints money for Xbox. He's a cool, hardcore, badass character who's pretty much the John Wick of video games. It doesn't matter how old the character gets, he's always ready to jump headfirst into the action. Character-wise, Marcus has been through a lot.
No! You are not going to die!
It's too late, Marcus. Every cell in my body's breaking down. And this is going to happen to every contaminated cell on Seraph. It has to.
No, goddammit, I can't lose you again!
I'm glad I was able to see you again, Marcus. Now go and live for me.
God!
Dad, no. He's gone. He's gone! He's gone.
He lost his best friend, he lost his wife, he lost his son, maybe, depending on your choice there. He lost a lot to the Locust and the Swarm. So obviously he has a lot of revenge and anger directed towards them all. Every favorite moment that I had with the Gears franchise had Marcus involved in some way. So to imagine a Gears of War game without him would be rough. With that being said, I'm not saying that he has to be front and center. He wasn't for the last 2 games for the most part. He's a key character, but it was all on Kate, JD, and Dell. But I would love to see how his character develops throughout the next game after the death of JD. Well, if you went that route again. Personally, I was more of a fan of Dell, so RIP JD. Seriously though, Gears of War 6 has a chance to really elevate Fenix's character. We would see 2 different versions of him playing out throughout the same game. One of which he continues to mourn the death of JD and is out for vengeance, and the other he can team up alongside his son and Kate to wipe out the Swarm once and for all. I'm pumped about this next Gears game, especially if it means that we could see Marcus in action even more than we have in the last 2 games. Get to it, Microsoft, come on. Number 9, Sonic the Hedgehog.
You never cease to surprise me, Blue Hedgehog. I thought that capsule you were in exploded in space.
You know, what can I say? I die hard.
You actually saved me, you know.
It was a Chaos Emerald, wasn't it? But there's no way you could have activated the Chaos Control using an emerald that's fake. So, there's more to you than just looking like me. What are you, anyway?
What you see is what you get. Just a guy that loves adventure. I'm Sonic the Hedgehog!
Sonic is probably the most different choice on my list. Most of my favorite characters come from horror games or mature action-adventure games. Sonic is actually the only character that I'm including on this list that comes from just a fun adventure franchise. I love Sonic and I have always loved Sonic. Spoiler for the rest of this list, but don't expect people like Mario or Link to pop up later. I've always been a fan of Sega's mascot over Nintendo's Mario and PlayStation's, well, whatever their mascot was, since it kind of changed every year. But Sonic was always the winner for me. I've had more fun with his games growing up. Something about Sonic's cool guy personality alongside of just wanting to go fast really won me over. Even the side scrollers for me were way more fun than the Super Mario World games. I loved running across the screen as fast as I could to then find myself facing off against some variation of Eggman, all while listening to the coolest and most hyped soundtracks. Even when we take a look at the Dreamcast days with Sonic Adventure 1 and 2. I love those games. Seeing Sonic race against time on some levels while also facing against some of the coolest villains was always entertaining to watch. Sonic vs. Shadow, Sonic vs. Eggman, and hell, Super Sonic vs. Chaos. Sonic Frontiers was the first time we saw a true open world for the franchise, and while it wasn't perfect, it was a new take on the series that I really enjoyed. Do I think Sonic mixes well with the open world? Probably not. But hey, he's still my go-to side scroller even after all of these years, and it's hard to find a more fun character than Sonic the Hedgehog.
Oh yeah! This is happening!
Number 8, Kratos, God of War.
There he is. There's the God of War.
PlayStation has truly developed so many IPs. From Uncharted to The Last of Us, I really don't think Xbox will ever have a chance to catch up to Sony when it comes to the original stories that Sony produces. And one franchise that has seen a recent resurgence and has been on the rise since its reboot is God of War. Back in 2018, we saw Santa Monica Studio reboot the God of War series with a unique chapter to Kratos and his journey. Instead of focusing on Greek mythology, Kratos came face to face with the gods of Asgard. Everything changed with Kratos and the God of War franchise with the newest entry. Kratos became a more relatable family man instead of being a soldier obsessed with war that we knew back in the older God of War games. We were treated to a more deep story with far better and unique characters. God of War 2018 and God of War Ragnarok are absolutely two of my favorite video games of all time. Kratos has always been an interesting character to me. From being the son of Zeus to killing every single Greek god to the amount of times he had to watch someone close to him die, I don't think any character has been through more than Kratos has. After losing his family once and fighting all the gods of Greek mythology, we see Kratos come over to Midgard to become a family man with Freya and his son Atreus. After the death of Freya, Kratos spends most of the first game training his son, while also trying to deliver the ashes of his late wife to the highest peak of all the realms. From there, Kratos learns what it means to be a father again, while also learning about the prophecy regarding his son and his own death. He comes face to face with Valkyries, Thor, and multiple monsters and creatures throughout his adventures in Midgard.
Boy. 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 Boy.
His attitude, his voice delivered by the incredible Chris Judge, and his character development throughout the series are all the reasons why I love Kratos. Number 7, Clive Rosfield, Final Fantasy XVI.
Joshua!
Clive!
My brother. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You're alive. We both are. Nothing else matters. I never dared hope that I would see this day.
My God, I can see the hate comments coming on this one. Listen, I know a lot of old school Final Fantasy fans are not going to like what I have to say about Clive and Final Fantasy XVI. I guess I should start this off with talking about how big of a fan of the series I am. I haven't played every single Final Fantasy game yet. I'm getting around to it, I promise. And the ones that I have played, except for the original game and Final Fantasy VII Remake, I haven't played in a really long time. So I feel like I'm probably what you would call a casual fan at best when it comes to the Final Fantasy franchise. Maybe that's a big reason as to why I enjoyed Final Fantasy XVI so much. The story of the game was phenomenal. The characters each had so much personality and character development throughout the game. And even the gameplay, which was probably one of the weaker parts for most fans, was pretty good in my opinion. But two characters stood out to me the most. One was Annabella Rosfield, who I thought was one of the best villains in video game history. The other, of course, is Clive Rosfield. Ben Starr killed it with his performance as Clive. Seriously, I think this guy really has a solid chance at winning that Best Performance trophy at the Game Awards this year. The emotional impact that this character needed to have throughout the game while also delivering a cool and collected main protagonist was just spot on by Starr. Clive was put in a tough position throughout the entire game. From thinking he killed his own brother to watching his own mom be responsible for the death of most of his family to losing others close to him, Clive is someone that just consistently felt the pain of loss. Instead of just giving up multiple times in his life when this happened, he always stayed true to his end game. Whether that was in the form of Clive trying to get revenge for the death of his brother or battling to save Valistia, Clive always stayed motivated in what he set out to do. He had amazing abilities and skills at his disposal. Having the power of Ifrit while also gaining the abilities of each icon, Clive was truly a unique character. It was amazing to watch his entire story unfold. And who knows, maybe there's more to that story that we haven't seen yet. I've only recently been introduced to him, but he's easily one of my favorite characters that I've seen in a video game. Number 6, Nathan Drake, Uncharted.
Roadkill.
Another character that might seem like he's out of my wheelhouse, but is someone that I truly enjoyed, is Nathan Drake. The Uncharted series is a franchise that I played multiple times. Growing up, my go-to console was always the PlayStation for one major reason: Uncharted. Sure, I was a fan of God of War and other PlayStation exclusives, but ever since the first Uncharted game was released on the PlayStation 3, I knew that I wouldn't ever want to miss out on any game in this series. And while I love the series for multiple different reasons, like the puzzles, the story, and the whole treasure hunting vibe, it was Nathan Drake's personality that kept me invested in the franchise.
Some kind of lamp. Hey, Smokey, need your lighter over here. You know, that hurts my feelings. Not as much as it hurts your lungs.
I know a lot of people like to compare Nathan Drake to Lara Croft, as they are pretty similar, especially since it's been around a lot longer. The fact is that for me, Nathan Drake is far more interesting and likable. His charming personality throughout even some of the most dangerous stunts keeps me entertained. Does he go overboard sometimes? Yeah, just a little bit, but I like to think he's sort of the Tony Stark of video games. No matter how bad the situation seems, he tries to find the bright side of everything. He's a family man with a daughter and a wife, he's a loyal friend and brother, and he's one of the best treasure hunters around in video game history. Number 5, Ellie, The Last of Us.
Ellie,
What?
tell them that Ellie is the little girl that broke your fucking finger.
So here's the thing, I battled back and forth about which character did I want to claim the number 5 spot here on this list. It was always going to be one of two characters from The Last of Us. Ultimately, I went with Ellie over Joel. Don't get me wrong, I love Joel. Straight up, I really wanted to include him side by side with Ellie, but if I just had to pick one of them, then Ellie takes the cake for me, for just a few different reasons. First off, I've always been a fan of the assholes. Yeah, Joel is an asshole too. That's why this choice was hard. But seriously though, I feel like Ellie's charming personality and her moments were slightly more entertaining to watch than Joel. Her witty comments throughout the first game always kept me laughing and enjoying the few moments of comedy that we had in the game.
A book just fell on my head. I only have myself to blame. Or wait, I said it wrong. Hold on, let me read it again. A book just fell on my head. I only have my shelf to blame. I ruined it.
However, when it was time for the emotional moments, she knocked it out of the park for me. Playing through the Left Behind DLC with her and Riley was extremely sad and heartfelt to watch. Watching her slowly build up to a relationship with Joel as the two of them grew closer throughout the journey was a beautiful experience. Watching her fight against the odds that were not in her favor multiple times was thrilling and scary to play through. She had someone that she became friends with become infected right before her eyes. It's a young girl that was forced to become an adult because of the world she grew up in. Going over to The Last of Us 2, we see a different side of Ellie. She's more vengeful and protective, and she's not afraid of anything, it seems. We see the more aggressive side of her as she's forced to do things that we would never have expected Ellie to do. I will say that I don't agree with a lot of decisions regarding Ellie and Joel in the sequel. However, her character managed to stand out a lot in a way that made her feel even more memorable and iconic. People might not agree with me on putting her on this list over Joel, but the fact is that both of them are truly iconic and amazing characters that are both deserving of cracking this list. For my own rules, I can only choose one character though, and my pick went to Ellie. Number 4, James Sunderland, Silent Hill 2.
I got a letter. The name on the envelope said Mary. My wife's name. It's ridiculous. Couldn't possibly be true. That's what I keep telling myself. A dead person can't write a letter. Mary died of that damn disease 3 years ago.
Here's another character that I went back and forth about, and honestly, I could easily see myself changing my mind at some point in the future. Ultimately though, from the Silent Hill universe, I chose to put James Sunderland on my list for favorite video game characters. I think Heather Mason in Silent Hill 3 is fantastic, but ultimately, I feel like James has a little more interesting traits compared to her. For one, the story of Silent Hill 2, in my opinion, is the best in the franchise. It finds a way to tell a psychological horror story while also connecting to deep emotions and sins of different characters. With James, we see probably one of the biggest reveals in video game history. I'm not sure how much I want to dive down into spoiler territory with Silent Hill 2 remake around the corner, but I'll say as much as I can. James lost his wife 3 years ago, but then he receives a letter from her saying that she is waiting for him in Silent Hill. Upon arriving in Silent Hill, James is treated to a ton of unimaginable horrors, including other characters battling through trauma. They are not the only ones though. James has his own regrets and trauma that he must battle with throughout the game. Each passing hour, the game gets more and more inside the head of James as we see the type of person he is and how he copes with the situation before him. I feel James is the most developed character ever in video games. Despite only appearing in one game, this character is one of the most popular characters in horror games. So it should be a no-brainer that a guy like me who loves and appreciates survival horror and psychological horror absolutely loves the character of James. Of course, I had to give him a high spot on this list.
Mary's gone. She's dead.
Liar, that's a lie!
No, that's not true.
Number 3, Clementine, The Walking Dead.
Please, I need help.
Not what it looks like to me. Looks like you can handle yourself just fine.
That's not what I meant.
Okay, now don't do anything stupid. 'Cause I'll shoot a lot quicker than you did.
I feel like Clementine might be one of the biggest surprises on this list. I mean, she cracked the top 3 for crying out loud. However, TellTale Games handles the Walking Dead series better than any other studio before them. Actually, I would argue that this series is probably the only good adaptation of The Walking Dead in video games, and Clementine is front and center throughout the entire series. We see Clementine in the first of 4 games alongside another amazing character, Lee. Lee is the main character in the first game, but his relationship with Clementine sets up an amazing start to her journey. At the beginning of this game, we see her as this innocent young girl at the start of the apocalypse. Lee, throughout time, becomes a father-like figure to her and ends up risking everything to save her. Clementine must make a choice at the end of the first game that will change her character forever. Eventually, we see her grow up and continue to become a leader figure in multiple different situations. She becomes an older sister or mother-like figure to a baby at such a young age as she pretty much raises this baby on her own. She comes across many enemies and allies, both new and old in the series, and she has to make extremely difficult and tough choices. We've seen so many different sides of her. The shy, timid girl, the tough, don't give a fuck about anybody badass, the leader who would do anything to protect those she cares about. She reminds me of Rick Grimes almost, as we see so many different versions of her throughout the series. I think one reason Clementine has become such a major character for me is the fact that we get to make different choices for her, creating our own version of Clementine along the way. Even the ending of the series is poetic for a character as it mirrors everything that has come before the conclusion. Even the ending of the series is poetic for the character as it mirrors everything that has come before. I never knew that Clementine would be such an amazing and awesome character based on my first experience with her in season 1 of The Walking Dead, but she absolutely did. She exceeded my expectations. The development from season 1 to season 4 is one of the best told stories for an individual character in video game history. My only regret is that we will probably never see another TellTale Walking Dead game, which means we'll probably never see her again, unfortunately. Still, Clementine has definitely made her mark. Number 2, Chris Redfield, Resident Evil.
Where is he? Chris? What have you done?
He's gone. I tried. He stayed so we could all escape. I'm sorry.
I'm sure you guys have been waiting for the Resident Evil character to pop up for a really long time. And if you haven't watched my top 10 best Resident Evil characters, then I'm sure you've been guessing who's going to crack the list from Resident Evil. Well, as much as I love Leon, Jill, Rebecca, Wesker, and so on, Chris Redfield has got to be my pick. I adore Chris. His story throughout the series is truly a roller coaster. From being one of the only survivors of the Spencer Mansion incident to losing his entire squad multiple times throughout the series, Chris has been in the fight against BOWs since the very beginning. He's appeared in more Resident Evil games than any other character in the series. Even Leon, who's basically Capcom's golden boy. I think a big reason for that comes down to the amount of development the character has had throughout the series. Starting back with the Spencer Mansion incident in the original Resident Evil, we see the rivalry between Chris and Wesker begin. He loses most of his team because of Wesker's betrayal. On top of that, people like Enrico believe that Chris might be the traitor. After surviving the Arklay Mountains, he immediately pursues the idea of bringing Umbrella down. He flies to Europe to investigate and begin his journey to bring the company down once and for all. And when he finds out his sister is in danger, he flies to rescue her immediately and save her. Oh, and did I mention that he went head to head with the superhuman version of Wesker in that same game? From there, he joins the BSAA, who helps fight against BOWs all over the world, in which Chris takes on multiple different viruses and parasites around the globe. The Ouroboros in Africa, the T-Abyss on the cruise ship, and even a sea virus in China. The last one on the list, he lost his team and close friend to, Pierce. You might think that with all of this loss and years of battling BOWs over and over again, that he would then finally just give up. Yet, he's the only character in the series that we know for sure that continues to battle against BOWs. He comes back years later to fight against Lucas Baker, the Molded, and Mother Miranda's experiments. Hell, even 16 years after those games, we learn that Chris is still fighting against BOWs thanks to the post-credits scene in Resident Evil Village.
Today of all days. We have a situation. You're needed, Evelyn.
Don't you ever call me that again.
Whoa, it's just a joke, Rose.
I can show you things even Chris doesn't know I can do.
It's insane to think about, but Chris continues to fight against BOWs to protect the world his entire life, and honestly, it's hard to resist putting him as my #1 spot on this list. However, there's just one character that I just adore a little bit more than Chris. Number 1, Roxas, Kingdom Hearts.
Hands off my friends.
It cannot be.
Roxas! My turn.
Roxas.
I know, this is probably the most insane choice for someone like me. If you guys have been following my channel, then you'll know that I tend to focus on survival horror, Resident Evil, Silent Hill, and so on. Well, obviously that tracks for some of this list, as we had Chris as my number 2 and even James from Silent Hill, as well as Ellie from The Last of Us. With that being said, while Resident Evil is my favorite video game franchise of all time, Kingdom Hearts is my second favorite. Kingdom Hearts is a massive franchise. As of today, there are 13 games in the series, all of which end up on just about every single platform out there, including phones. The series primarily focuses on Sora, a young boy as he battles the forces of darkness. What really stands out about the story though is that it finds a way to combine two completely different companies into one, Disney and Square Enix. If you've ever wanted to see Final Fantasy characters interact with Disney characters, then this is the game for you guys. Anyway, enough about the series as we're here to talk about Roxas. He's not a huge part of the series. He's a main character in like one game and playable in two others. Yet one of my dogs is named after him. What makes Roxas so special to me is his story. Who he is, where he comes from. All of those elements combine for one of the most interesting characters I've seen in video games. Roxas is a nobody. Seriously, that's literally what he's called. Without going into some really confusing territory as the story of Kingdom Hearts gets a little wild, just know essentially Roxas is kind of a clone of Sora, the main character of the franchise. However, with him awake, Sora is not. Therefore, Roxas, a boy who's just been living out his life and trying to enjoy his summer vacation, has his entire world turned upside down. He finds out that he's not supposed to exist. He finds out that he had a life that was completely erased from his memory. And he finds out that he must give up his own life so that Sora, someone who is supposed to exist, can live. It's a really sad story as we have to watch Roxas consistently lose everything in his life that he cares about. His best friends, his own life, his fake best friends, everything. I won't go too much into spoiler territory in case you haven't played the entire series, but just know that this is the most tragic character that consistently has to deal with a lot. More than any other character in this series in my opinion. And it's someone that I found myself constantly rooting for. I love Roxas, he's a legend. He can wield two keyblades, something that very few characters can do in the series. He's a deep character with a lot of baggage. And he has one of the best stories from start to end. That's just a few reasons why he takes the #1 spot for me, guys.
You're lucky. Looks like my summer vacation is over.
But that does it for this episode of Nerd Space Games. What do you guys think about my list for top 10 favorite characters in video games? Remember, it's just my personal 10. I know there are some wildcard choices on this list, but these are just the people that caught my attention the most throughout my years of playing video games. But I want to know your list. What are your top 10 characters in video games? No cheating, you can only choose one character per franchise. I'd love to know your opinion, so hit up those comments and leave your list down below. Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for more ranking videos like this one, especially if you love Resident Evil, Silent Hill, and other survival horror content. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerd Space Games. Take care.